Hi everyone, welcome back to my home studio. This is my day 38 of my quarantine distraction videos that I've been doing for my students and for all of you while we are quarantined or in isolation with the coronavirus right now. So today's video took me a couple of days to kind of put together and get everything shot because it was the process of loading and firing my kiln. So in this video, I'm going to go over a bisque firing, so loading and firing a bisque load. I have an automatic kiln, but I also review how to fire a manual kiln that has a kiln sitter and understanding a little bit of that. I do have a kiln vent. My studio is in my house basement, and the kiln vent is a very, very important aspect to keep all of the fumes out of my house. It's very important that when you fire that you don't smell the fumes in your house. That is dangerous. So we want to get the fumes out. That's why I use my overhead vent. There are undermount vents. I used to have one, but I do have a video on my overhead vent on how I installed it. If you would like to see that, it's a vent-a-kiln. I don't get anything from this. I like it, and it made a big difference to me when I started using it. And it also takes out a lot of heat. My kitchen doesn't get as hot up above. So hopefully you find this informative. Drop me any questions below if you have any. If you do have questions on understanding, well, what kind of glaze can you use with your clay body, the first thing that you want to do is always check your clay body. What is the firing temperature to mature your clay body? Okay, and then you can select your glaze based on that. But I do have a packet. It's included within a video that I put out a couple of weeks ago for my kids. It was reviewing glaze information for those kids. So you might want to consult that because a lot of the basics are in there. So I hope you enjoy. Drop me any questions below if you've got them, and stay safe, stay healthy, and keep potting if you can. First of all, when I load a bisque kiln, I am usually doing a stacking or what's called a tumble stacking arrangement of loading. As long as you're loading things in a stable way, so they're not going to put undue pressure that might warp something, you can stack things in a bisque kiln one on top of the other. The glaze kiln is the one where you have to worry about having things touch, because if you have two glaze pieces and they're touching, they will melt, the glaze will melt, and they would end up by fusing together. But a bisque kiln does not have that danger with it. Now, the one caveat I would say is if you do have underglaze on some of your things, like on the bottom of something, sometimes the underglaze can transfer a little bit. Maybe it's transferring vapor, I'm not too sure, but it can leave a ring on something if it has underglaze, that especially if it's a bright underglaze like blue or something on the whatever it's sitting on. So just be aware of that. When I bisque fire items, I often will stack things rim to rim, bowls rim to rim, or in the case of this, because this has a flat bottom, I could easily just set it right on top, the bottom right on the top. If I'm firing multiple plates, I stack rim to rim. It helps to keep them a little bit more stable to prevent warping. Also, if you have a bottom of a plate stacked on a bottom of a plate and a bottom of a plate, that's a lot of weight that sometimes could cause some uneven heating. So I think when they're rim to rim, it allows them to heat a little bit more evenly. Couple things to be aware of when you're loading a kiln. You want to try to load it in order to get even heating. So if you have, maybe you have some thinner items, like you have like a tray, try not to put the tray on the very top or the very bottom of the kiln. Try to put things like that toward the middle, because if you have a really shallow shelf on the top or a shallow shelf on the bottom, it could cause uneven heating. Now, let's talk a little bit about the firing temperature for kilns. If you are not fully aware, the big difference in firing a glaze load and a bisque load are going to be the temperatures. Bisque firing is the very first firing that something goes through. I bisque fire all of my pieces to cone 04. That's typically what my glazes recommend. Cone 04 is, if I remember right, it's around 1945 degrees Fahrenheit. And that gives you a nice strong clay body, but yet porous enough that when you go to apply glaze, it is soaking in some of the water from the glaze, and it helps the glaze to apply real evenly. Now, it's the glaze firing. That's where you have to be very attentive. Sometimes when people are new, they don't understand the differences in the glaze firing temperatures. So I want to just explain that. First of all, let's talk about what a pyrometric cone is. So pyrometric cones are cones that are formulated of a very specific clay body to bend at a very particular temperature. So if I show this one, okay, where's the camera? There we go. So as you see this cone, it's stamped with a 6. This is cone 6. So this is going to bend somewhere in the neighborhood of like 2220, if I remember right. So this is my target temperature for my stoneware glazes that I use. I use Coyote cone 6 glazes, and I fire to cone 6. Now the way that cones work is you put cones that are 3 different temperatures, or you could do 4. I just didn't have a 4th cone here. So typically I do 3 different temperatures. I do a cooler cone, the target cone, and then a cone that's a little too hot. So this is my cone 6 cone that I would use when I fired. This is cone 5. So cone 5 is cooler, and cone 7 is right here. Cone 7 is hotter. I am not using this cone pack on my bisque firing though, because if you remember, I said my bisque firing is cone 04. I don't actually have any cone 04 cones today. Usually I'm not using the cones during my bisque firing. I use the cones during my glaze firing. So I'll show you those when they come out later, but they will physically like bend. It will start to kind of slump like that when it reaches temperature. Since bisque firing is the very first firing that our pieces are going through, it's getting rid of the chemical water at this point. So I want to make sure that the mechanical water has been completely thoroughly dried. Okay, the mechanical water is the water of plasticity. That's what makes it wet. So you have to make sure that your pieces are bone dry. If you are firing a bisque kiln and you have water vapor in your piece, maybe it's way down in the core of your piece and you don't even know it's there. If you have water vapor and you take it up past the boiling point, which is what, 212 degrees Fahrenheit, if you take it over 212 degrees Fahrenheit, that water vapor will turn to steam and explode. You know the power behind a steam engine. It's the same thing in a kiln. If you have water vapor that turns to steam, it will blow up your pieces. The biggest culprit for firing problems of things blowing up is water vapor. Air bubbles can cause a problem, but most of the time I would say it's probably air bubbles that have a little bit of water vapor in it. I've had people, maybe kids, where they make a hollow form or something and it's a big air bubble and they forget to vent it. All a hollow form needs is a single needle tool hole to allow it to vent, so if there's any water vapor that's in there, it will vent out. But I've had things that are pretty dry that and I thought a kid vented it, and I'll open up the kiln and it'll be there in 2 pieces where it just kind of pops apart. I think that it's probably the water vapor that's causing it more than anything though. Now we're doing a little experiment to show. So I have some eggs that I have thrown. Some have holes, at least one has a hole, and some of them don't have holes. So this one is not vented at all. It's a hollow egg. We're gonna fire that in this kiln, and it is bone dry. It's been dry for about a week. So we'll see how that comes out. If my plan works the way I think it should. The water vapor should be able to kind of get through the wall, and it'll be dry enough that it should fire without any problem. So just remember, water vapor, huge culprit. So when I am firing, I have to make sure that my pieces are not sticking up above the edge. So as you can see, I'm kind of close, but I'm probably about 1/4 inch away from the edge there. What I have going on up here on the top. So these are some of the drape molds that I made. This is the tray that I made early on in the quarantine, but I want you to notice that I have some stilts on top of it. I put some stilts on top of it to act as a weight, and that tray does have a foot. It's sitting on a foot. I don't know if you can see it. I sometimes fire weights on top of an item if I feel like it might have a tendency to warp. And because I have placed this on the top when I probably shouldn't have, I decided to go ahead and weight it down. Now, I do want to talk about different types of kilns, the operation of it. Mine is a scut. There are many different great manufacturers of kilns. This is my second scut that I've owned personally, and I've owned multiple scuts at school. They're very user-friendly. I also have a couple of L&Ls at school, which I love. The element holders are brilliant on them. Now this one is computerized. My original kiln was not computerized. It had a kiln sitter with it, and I will show you the operation of a kiln sitter in just a minute, but this is a junior cone. This is a cone 5 junior cone, and the idea behind a kiln sitter is it has a rod which is pushing down in the middle of that junior cone, and as the cone begins to melt, the rod falls, automatically will turn off the kiln. Now, even with a kiln sitter, you should be using a backup timer if you have one on your kiln, and you should be using cone packs to visually check, and always monitor how long it's taking to fire. I keep a pretty meticulous log of my firings of my kiln, so I know how long it's been taking to do a certain firing. So when it gets close to the time that I think it should be, I know that it should be time for it to turn off. If you do not have a computerized kiln, you would probably have an older style that has a kiln sitter with it. A kiln sitter is a great little device that will help to trigger the kiln off when it reaches temperature. Now, a kiln sitter has a little 3-pronged piece on the inside. The middle piece moves up and down, and that is where you put your little junior cone. So as I put the junior cone here, okay, it sits there in between the bottom supports, and then the top little support is actually kind of pushing down on it. Now, I didn't actually set this out here because I was holding the camera, but out here you can see there's a little weighted, I'm just going to call it a pendulum. I don't know what else you would call it. There's a little weighted piece right here, and this little top thing, when that is pushed down, it holds the weight in place. Now that is being held up. The little rod is being held up. So let me fix this and I'll show you. So I hold up this little rod, I slide the junior cone in there, and the stamped cone temperature is on the top of it, not on the bottom, okay? And then out here you can see, because the rod is above the junior cone, now this little trigger is in the up position, and it's holding the pendulum in place. When the junior cone bends, so this is an example of one that I took out of there. When the junior cone bends, the top rod is going to fall and bend. This little guy right here, that's going to raise up. Okay, this will raise up when it falls and bends, and then the pendulum part will fall down. Now the power switch, oops, pardon my hand, the power switch is right here. So as I push that in, that brings power to the kiln. You can see my power button is on. Currently, I have it on off, but if I turn it on low, you can hear it. The relay just kicked on, and that is starting to heat up. Okay, now this little baby test kiln is a nice little thing that I use maybe occasionally to test out a glaze if we have a glaze sample we're going to try. Now the way that I normally would use these, especially when I had a larger kiln and I used to fire everything with a cone sitter, I would usually start off, especially if I'm bisque firing, I would take out both of my peephole plugs, okay, when it was on low, and I would prop the lid. And when I say prop it, I would put like a little post in there so it's up a couple of inches. Now that's for bisque fire. I would do that on low for a couple of hours just to keep it so it can dry out really well. Then after a couple hours, I would drop the lid, plug the peepholes. If you have an undermount vent, you could plug them both. If you don't have an undermount vent, leave the top one unplugged. And then you could maybe 2 more hours on low once it's dropped, then turn it up. So every couple of hours, then maybe I would turn it up halfway. And then eventually, to get to the final temperature, after 2 hours there, I would turn it up again. Now, you will be testing your kiln and paying attention to how long it fires, so you know if it has gone past the time, you should be checking it and turning it off. And if you use cones, a cone pack when you fire, it's very helpful. So that I'm just going to turn this off right now, okay, because I'm not really going to fire, and I'll take out my little junior cone, and then when that just fell, it actually turned it off. So when this pendulum falls, you can see that the little power button, it pops out and it will automatically turn off. So that's how a kiln sitter works. Hopefully that makes sense. But just remember, slow, steady drying is what you want. Even though this video is about bisque firing, it's important to keep in mind glaze temperatures that you'll use eventually. You need to make sure that your glaze is compatible with your clay body. If you have a low fire clay body, you have to have a low fire glaze. Low fire is usually in the range of cone 05, 06, 07, depending on what it is. Mid fire is about cones 5 and 6. And then high fire is going to be stoneware and porcelain up in the range of cone 10, cone 12. And at that point, a lot of people get into reduction of gas firing. Okay, so now I'm ready to go ahead and drop my lid. The lid support just holds it in place. I'm going to drop the lid. I happen to have a lid lifter on mine, which I probably don't need on such a small kiln, but I do like it, especially the older I get with my back. It's kind of nice. Now this little lock is just a safety to keep it from being opened. I don't really need it, but I do use it. I have 4 peepholes. I'm going to leave the top peephole open. I'm going to bring my vent hood down. Now, I used to have an EnviroVent that mounted underneath, and actually I still have the pipe sticking out down there. I just don't have a working vent anymore. I haven't taken it off. But I do like this vent-a-kiln, the hood, because it removes a lot more of the heat from my space. So I don't notice, it doesn't heat up my ceiling and my kitchen floor above it quite so much. And I also don't notice any fumes. Now, let's talk about how I'm going to turn this on. Okay, so as you can see, it is flashing idle right now, and it's just flashing the temperature that it currently is. I think it might be off by 2 degrees, but it's pretty close to what it is right down here in my basement. That's why it's so chilly right now. So normally when I come back here though, before I have cleared it out, it will flash the completed time and how long it took. So like my last firing was completed in 8 hours and 40 minutes. And I know that because I have it written down on my log. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to hit stop, okay? And that clears out anything that's there. So if it had the completed time, it clears it out. Now I am doing a bisque firing. I do have my choice of 2 different methods that I could fire. So you can see this is what makes Scuts very user-friendly. It has this cone firing programs, which are automatically programmed for either slow, medium, or fast firing. Or over here on the right, I could do my manual programmed ramp hold mode, which I use these quite a bit if I am doing a specialty firing, like maybe crystalline glazes or glass fusing, or maybe I am in a rush to dry something out and I need to dry it out slow and steady. I don't like to dry things out that much in my kiln though, because the more you hold it at a low temperature, those relays come on and off, and I just feel like it lessens the life of them. So I like to have things bone dry, really, as a rule of thumb when I'm firing. Okay, so let's talk about the cone firing program, because that's what I'm going to use. The first step is I hit cone fire. And then it's asking me, do I want to preheat? You can see that says preheat 000. I do want to preheat on this. It's a bisque firing. I need to make sure that that water is out of there. So even though I know this is bone dry, I'm going to preheat it for 1 hour and 30 minutes. If it was a little bit thicker and I was a little bit concerned, I would preheat it for longer than that. One of the tricks that you can do if you're ever concerned, has your water vapor left your pieces, when you have that open, the top peephole that's open, you can hold a mirror right above it, and if there's water vaping coming out, it'll fog up your mirror, or a piece of glass, something like that. Okay, now it's asking me the cone. So it remembers the last firing that I did, which was cone 5, but this time I'm doing cone 04 because I'm doing bisque, so I have to change my cone. 04, enter. My speed, now I have choices of slow, medium, or fast. Now, slow I would definitely use if I had really big pieces, big platters, big bowls, maybe things that were a little extra thick, I would do slow. Medium was probably what I use the majority of the time, and that's what I'm using today. I have, you know, a few like trays, I have a few big vases, but they're thin. I have several cups, so this is what I'm going to use. Now, fast would be if I had a bunch of small things, very thin, I'm not worried about them being fragile, I might do that. But I do tend to use medium, just to make medium or slow sometimes, to make sure that all of the water vapor is gone, and to help maybe burn out a little bit of impurities that might be in it. Sometimes if you don't fire quite hot enough on your bisque or slow enough on your bisque, you might get bloating on things. Either that, or maybe you've over-fired your glaze. And so I'm going to hit medium and then enter. Now the hold time, it's asking me, do I want to hold it at the final temperature? Do I want to hold it at cone 04? I don't typically hold bisque that much, but I'm going to go ahead and hold it at 10 minutes, quite simply because I'm doing medium instead of slow. And then that brings me back to idle, and now I hit start. You're going to hear the relay click. Now, when that clicks, that indicates it's sending electric there. You're going to hear the relay click on and off a lot during the firing, especially in the early stages, because it's trying to heat it up and then it holds it. It heats it up and then it holds it there. If if it didn't click off, it would just continue heating, which it will do that closer to the end of the firing cycle. When you're reaching the final temperature, it will click, but not click off right away. It's gonna be on and glowing and hold it there for a while. Okay, so I'm looking back at my log and I can see the last time I fired. I would probably guess the kiln wasn't quite packed as full as this. When I have a packed kiln, it can take a little longer to fire, but I can see my total time was 9 hours and 22 minutes. I didn't preheat it for quite as long though. I only preheated it for 40 minutes. So if I add on 50 minutes to that, it'll be, I would estimate a little over 10 hours to fire. So we're gonna set a timer, and I'm gonna come back and I'll be checking it periodically. Oh, and also I always monitor a kiln when I'm firing it. I make sure that I'm around. This is in the morning. I've started it in the morning, and I'll be firing it through the day, so I'll be checking it, and this will be off before I go to bed tonight. The last thing that I want to do, and I was waiting till I was done talking, is I am going to turn on my vent-a-kiln. So it's going to vent the whole time. So it's easy. It's got a little switch back here. Okay. If you would like to see how I installed the vent-a-kiln, I have a video on that I did. I really like it. The unwired vent was nice, but I had difficulty with it heating up my studio space too much, therefore heating up my my ceiling and my kitchen above. It got really hot. So this helps to eliminate a little bit more of the heat. So I'm gonna let that go. Make sure that I don't have anything combustible. I'm gonna move my chair out of here that I was sitting on when I was programming it. And we'll check back in a little bit and we'll see how it is from time to time. Okay, my kiln is done firing and it's cooled off. I can turn off my fan now. Put that up. Now you will see that my time complete is flashing here. It says it took 10 hours and 48 minutes, which I'm going to mark on my log. And that is right in the area where I thought it would be. I thought it might be, I had estimated somewhere around just short of 10:30, but this is a very full kiln, so it probably took a little bit longer. Now I can go ahead and raise this. Okay. So, and I did not mention it, but it was showing it was 78 degrees. I do not open my kiln when it's over 200. I like to be able to wait until I can physically touch them with my bare hands. I don't like to cause thermal shock or anything. So if you recall, I had a few eggs without any vent holes that I mentioned I was firing. These are completely hollow forms that had no venting and they did not blow up. It's because they were dry. So just remember that it's not air that makes something blow up. It is water vapor. Here are my spoon rests that I made a couple weeks ago. Here are my tiny little dishes that I made for our little hedgehog. I need to glaze those because she's been needing those for some time. And these are drape molds that I made so I can drape clay over. I'll do some more videos with those. And I know I mentioned it before, but the reason I put these on my finished tray there was to help prevent warping. I did dry it a little fast and I had a little bit of warping, so that helps to flatten it out some. These are some molds that I have made for a video that I'm going to shoot this coming week. There's the square plate with the slip trailing that I did. Oops. Some more drape molds. Here's my little salt cellar that I made. That was one of my early coronavirus videos. Here's my citrus juicer. And the couple of vases. This was the vase that I did when it had the red gouache paint on it, and notice the red is gone. This is what I said would burn off. The other vase, these are going to be luminaries. That's why they have the holes. My little Fabergé inspired egg. My shaker. My cups with the spirals. And then I have a whole bunch of my, I didn't do these with videos, I have a whole bunch of my National Parks mugs in here as well. Mishima cups. I did show, I shot a video of this, but I haven't done anything with that video yet. So I'll show you the interior of the kiln right now. So you can still see I have another shelf in there that I need to take out. What I really wanted to show you was right here where the thermocouple sticks out. This is the temperature gauge, the temperature sensor. I wanted you to notice what was underneath there. The thermocouple does flake from time to time during firing. It just oxidizes and things flake off of it. I have been meaning to make just like a little kind of cover to go around it, which I think I might, just to help corral that stuff so it doesn't flake all over the kiln and may potentially get on pots, even though it didn't get on anything during this load. So I hope you all were able to pick up something from this. If you don't have experience firing kilns, hopefully this will help guide you a little bit to give you a little bit more confidence. So don't forget to like and subscribe, comment, and share it with others if you think anyone can benefit from it. So stay safe, stay healthy, and keep potting if you can.